if two superpowers are in Helsinki in Finland, Russia and the United States of America are charting a new course of ties. As we speak, Trump and Putin are holding a one-on-one meeting in the presidential palace in Helsinki, sans their advisors. Donald Trump addressed the media before the two leaders headed into their closed-door meeting. The meeting was delayed by an arch-courtesy Vladimir Putin, who kept the United States president waiting. The President of the United States said that he and his counterpart will discuss a range of issues from nuclear armament to military and trade. He expressed his hope that this meeting will start a new chapter in the strained relations of the two long-term adversaries. After a one-on-one discussion, the two leaders will then be joined by their advisors, and an extended meeting will take place following that. President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are expected to address a joint news conference. This meeting marks the first formal meeting between the two leaders since Trump took to Oval Office. However, Trump says he has low expectations from the summit. But as Trump made his way to the presidential palace, he was greeted by a huge banner that called him out over the treatment to the press. Finland's largest newspaper mocked Trump, put up a big billboard which read, "Mr. President, welcome to the land of free press." Close to 300 such billboards were put up on the route from Helsinki airport to the presidential palace where the two leaders are meeting. Earlier today, Donald Trump accused his predecessors for pursuing a foolish policy. Trump took to Twitter and also said that the relationship between the US and Russia has never been worse because of the stupidity of the United States of America. So the press conference will take place at 7:30. This will be a 90-minute long meeting. The meeting has started. It's taking place in Helsinki, and Helsinki is a neutral country. It's not aligned. It's not with NATO. And even previously the meetings, similar meetings had taken place in Helsinki. So Helsinki has a record of hosting such meetings. Even Brezhnev had a meeting. Even Kennedy went to Helsinki to meet his counterpart. So Helsinki in 60s and 70s had an important role to play when it came to Russia and America. Now, let me go across to Dan Ashby, our correspondent from Moscow. Dan, thank you for joining us from Moscow. Can you tell us what will be the takeaways and what are the areas which may be taken up by Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in the meeting?
Yeah, sorry for that slight disruption. Just caught the end of your question there. But President Trump has come in and said that he will be talking about China, our mutual friend, President Xi, in his own words, nuclear, military, trade. He said that between Russia and the US, they have 90% of nuclear capability between them. And he said that's not a good thing. That's a negative force for the world. So suggesting he wants to see a new SMART treaty, perhaps new treaties to reduce the military capability, particularly nuclear, of both countries. But I think the interesting thing is that President Putin said they would also be talking about hotspots. Now, of course, that may include Syria, it may include the Ukraine. I think Russia won't be talking about Crimea. It does not see that as an issue at all. But there has been some talk about whether President Trump will pull out any sort of US involvement in Syria, which would be good news to President Putin's ears. So the big question, though, for President Trump back home is, will he bring up alleged Russian interference in the US election? Of course, we saw that 12 Russians have just been indicted. President Trump at the moment is making very few noises that he will do that.
Dan, you were talking about the things which can be taken up, things which might not come up. So what are the areas which are not as controversial as Crimea? What are the other areas on which the talks can take place?
Well, I think there's just very little expectation going into these talks. The Russian side said they saw this as baby steps, to use their words. Just getting to this meeting is a success for the Russians. Of course, they've been facing a sort of pariah status by many countries around the world. So the very fact that President Trump is willing to come to Finland to meet with President Putin helps to bring Russia in from the cold, if you like. It's seen as a success for President Putin, who can grandstand on the global stage, so that Moscow still plays a pivotal role in many issues. But on the actual policy outcomes, they haven't really been promising very much. There is so little agreement agreement between the two states. And even though President Trump is promising a new relationship with President Putin, this is at a time when the US has pretty strong sanctions against Russia, and in President Trump's own words, the worst relationship in many, many years. So I think they will see it as a success if they can just get talking. Nobody's expecting any big policy outcomes. However, everyone will be watching very closely if there's an announcement on Syria.
Dan, you stay with me. For our viewers, before I go back to Dan again to Moscow, let us play out what Donald Trump had to say.
Well, first of all, Mr. President, I'd like to congratulate you on a really great World Cup, one of the best ever, from what everybody tells me, one of the best ever, and also for your team itself doing so well. I watched quite a bit. In the United States, we call it soccer, and I watched quite a bit of it, and I watched the entire final and the semifinals, and they were really spectacular games, but it was beautifully done. So congratulations on that. Most importantly, we have a lot of good things to talk about and things to talk about. We have discussions on everything from trade to military to missiles to nuclear to China. We'll be talking a little bit about China. Our mutual friend, President Xi. I think we have great opportunities together as two countries that, frankly, we have not been getting along very well for the last number of years. I've been here not too long, but it's getting close to 2 years. But I think we will end up having an extraordinary relationship. I hope so. I've been saying, and I'm sure you've heard over the years, and as I campaigned, that getting along with Russia is a good thing, not a bad thing. And I really think the world wants to see us get along. We are the two great nuclear powers. We have 90% of the nuclear, and that's not a good thing, it's a bad thing. And I think we hopefully can do something about that, because it's not a positive force, it's a negative force. So we'll be talking about that, among other things. And with that, the world awaits, and I look forward to our personal discussion, which I think begins now, and then we're going to meet our whole team. You have quite a few representatives on I do, and we all have a lot of questions, and hopefully we'll come up with answers, most importantly. It's great to be with you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
And let me go across to Diana, correspondent from Moscow. Diana, as you said to me in one of my earlier questions, that there are very low expectations. That's the word you used. Low expectations from the meeting. But the question is, then what is on the plate for US President Donald Trump and the Premier of Russia, Vladimir Putin? Then what's there on the plate for both of them?
In terms of what's at stake here, I mean, just trying to get the relationship going. And I think for Russia, what they really want is to lessen these sanctions that they have. The problem is for President Putin is that although President Trump might say that he is a good friend to President Putin, or at least he wants to be, he wants to improve relationships, President Trump has very little power to change those sanctions. So I think President Putin will be happy that President Trump has come straight out, complimented the World Cup. And of course, President Trump, interestingly enough, has gone into these talks actually attacking his own country, saying that it has been years of foolishness and US stupidity that has led to a deterioration in relationship, rather than saying, for instance, it is Russia's annexation of Crimea, or it's Russia's alleged involvement in Ukraine and meddling in elections. So Russia very much feels like it's on the front foot at the moment. It's got everything to gain and very little to lose. And I think it will want to use this meeting to try get some improvement and some outcomes that they can work on together. Of course, President Putin very much sees President Xi in China as an ally, and it'll be interesting to see where President Trump is taking that, considering all the talk around a trade war. But yes, this will be a victory for President Putin, and now we all await those policy outcomes.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan, for joining us from Moscow.